Euromaxx highlights. And here's your host, Louise Houghton.
Hello and thanks for joining us. Let's start by having a quick look at what we have in store for you today. Flying Dutchman, how a filmmaker from the Netherlands takes to the air. New talents, German photographer Jim Rakete and his unknown musicians. Russian art, how Pavel brings graffiti to the streets of Moscow. But first, if you've ever seen a supermodel in real life and thought that they have imperfections like everyone else, then you'd be right. No one's perfect. So, how do advertisers get the perfect picture? Well, if it's beautiful hands that they're looking for, they might very well hire someone like hand model Nina Taylor. We met up with her in London to see the illusion in the making.
Long, symmetrical, flawless. These perfectly formed fingers feature in ads for luxury fashion and fine jewellery. They belong to Nina Taylor. The 30-year-old is considered the supermodel in her profession. In advertising campaigns, her hands double for those of stars like Hollywood actress Scarlett Johansson, German top model Heidi Klum, or British style icon Kate Moss.
For magazines and advertising campaigns, we know how much they strive for so-called perfection, and I suppose that's the world we live in. It's very aesthetic and, there's nothing wrong with Kate's hands, but I suppose maybe I look after mine a little bit better than she does.
10 in the morning, a photo shoot in an industrial area of London's trendy Chelsea district. Nina Taylor is, as usual, perfectly dressed. Fashion magazine Glamour has hired her to model exclusive jewellery from brands such as Cartier.
Hello, Ted.
Nina,
we've
worked together before.
A hand model can earn up to €6,000 for such a high-profile job. Some jobs, however, are worth just €60 to €100.
The shoots that I do where I'm wearing £1 million worth of diamonds or something is a lot of the time in an editorial job that actually pays less than, say, an advertising job where you're advertising something, a bracelet that might cost £5 or something. It's a really weird kind of contradiction in a way.
The daughter of a former German model and a British musician, Nina Taylor lives in London. She often gets jobs on short notice, so she makes sure her hands are always in perfect condition. Even opening a drink can be complicated. She can't afford to break a nail or scratch or cut a finger.
My hands are insured for £2 million. It's sort of part in the contract. It says that you're not allowed to do certain things: rock climbing, skiing. God knows, I should read the contract again. Actually, I can't remember, but there's quite a few things. I suppose things like cooking and stuff like that. I don't really do anyway. So washing up and cooking, it's not really applicable to my lifestyle anyway, which is just as well. So.
Before every photo shoot, a professional gives Nina Taylor a manicure and makes up her hands.
Her hands are symmetrical, perfectly symmetrical from one side to the other, which is what makes it so special, because the fingers are long, the bones are exactly, each knuckle is exactly like the one before it.
Then come the final touches. But it can take hours before the photographer sets up the perfect shot. In this line of work, patience can be just as important as perfect hands.
It's very much a precision work. It's just as difficult and demanding as general modelling, even though people might not believe that. But because you're focused on one part of the body, it means you've got to, when you think about hands, it's not just the hands, oh, move that, or whatever. I'm looking at the gap between fingers, millimetre gaps.
Nina Taylor's clients include luxury labels like Chanel or Dior, cosmetics companies, fashion magazines and advertising firms. This time her hands are being photographed for a German fashion magazine.
The shot is lovely, but as you remember, we had the two assistants on either side blowing into straw-like rods to make this all happen, and that's what I really love. I love the beginning-to-end process, and then seeing the end result as well. You know, it gives me a real kick, actually.
And the best thing for Nina Taylor is, unlike other top models, she doesn't have to sign exclusive contracts. This way she can have her fingers in as many pies as she likes.
Well, I think I can only dream of having hands that elegant. And talking of dreams, the most common one I've heard amongst friends is being able to fly. And Jano Smeets from the Netherlands has worked for months to attempt to live that exact fantasy. With a day job working on animated films, Smeets, for a time, got to portray the likes of Superman or Peter Pan and feel the wind in his wings. At least, that's what people who saw his video thought. But Smeets later admitted on television that it was all a hoax. Nonetheless, it's a pretty amazing clip.
He takes off and flies like a bird over a park in The Hague. The Flying Dutchman, Jano Smeets, a 21st century Icarus.
It was such a great feeling. Really, the best moment of my life.
Echt het lekkerste moment dat ik gewoon ooit in mijn hele leven heb gevoeld.
Almost 7 million people have watched this video online. It's the high point of a story that started 8 months earlier when Jano Smeets started posting internet reports on the progress of his dream of flight. But Jano Smeets doesn't exist. He's the creation of filmmaker Floris Kijk.
Jano Smeets is, well, he looks a bit like me, but he has brown eyes. So I gave him lenses. And he is a mechanical engineer. Jano Smeets is a fictional character which I made up for my Human Birdwings project. Well, he played the main role in the project, and he invented the wings and tested them by really flying with the wings.
Floris Kijk, alias Jano Smeets, kept an online diary and was active on social media sites. Fans contacted Jano and wished him luck. But the whole thing was an art project scripted by Floris Kijk. The flight animation was done on his computer. It was a tricky matter.
When there are children running here, in the next shot you don't see them anymore. It would have been a problem.
Kijk used a special motion capture suit to record his flying motions and took care of the rest on screen.
I can understand their disappointment because I'm also disappointed when I wake up from my dream of being able to fly. If you're really disappointed, then start an initiative to really make these wings for real and make them function.
Kijk says he wanted to tell a story in a different way with the help of the internet. In his regular life, he makes traditional animated films that are shown at festivals. Kijk is successful. He's won many awards. The Netherlands even entered one of his movies as an Oscar contender in the animated film category.
In all my films, I share my fascination for the future, and I like to fantasize about how our human bodies will change in the next 100 years due to modern technology.
One of Kijk's projects can take 3 years to complete. Luckily for him, Dutch government subsidies allow him to live off his films. From the beginning with his first project, The Order Electrus, he's tried to challenge viewers.
A male wire condenser fancies a female.
It looks like a traditional documentary.
Magnificent examples of mechanical perfection and natural adaptation.
Right now I'm thinking about fantasizing about how a documentary would look like in 15 years. I would like to make some kind of a science fiction documentary.
Kijk continues to dream of human flight. Thanks to Floris Kijk, we know how it might look. And thanks to his video, his career has taken off as well.
And with our feet firmly back on the ground, let's now take a look at the work of Jim Rakete, a German photographer who's captured many a celebrity name throughout his 40-year career. With many of these being known musicians, Rakete turned his focus to the younger generation here in Berlin for his latest exhibition. Regardless of whether the bands were signed or still practising in basements, Rakete wanted to capture the person behind the musician.
Berlin has a vibrant music scene that's been largely ignored by the media. Until Jim Rakete came up with the idea for Rock Poets, his new show.
I wondered for the longest time, who are the people I hear on the radio? I didn't know a thing about them. I'd look in the newspaper and maybe see a single concert ad, even though these were all talented and successful people. So I thought there must be a way to get them together and make them visible.
The show portrays musicians like Bonaparte, Dylan and Max Prosa, rock poets who the photographer got to know well during his work.
Who broke my heart? Dylan and Cat Frankie. And of course, also the guy hanging around behind me with his beautiful Gibson guitar, Mr. Prosa. You can tell these people's hearts are in making music. They're not into scheming. Their main thing is music.
Jim Rakete has his heart in it too. Even as a child, he loved taking photos. His breakthrough came with his portraits of some of Germany's biggest names in the music scene. He even managed the punk singer Nina Hagen for a time. And he helped Nena build her career. He was her manager when, in the early 1980s, her song 99 Red Balloons was a #1 hit in Germany, the United States and Japan. But ultimately, he devoted himself entirely to photography, capturing images of German actors. Including Hollywood stars like Armin Müller-Stahl and Christoph Waltz. And also the US director Quentin Tarantino. He's also tried his hand with politicians, such as former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, current Chancellor Angela Merkel, and former Chancellor Willy Brandt. But through the years, he always returned to musicians: Jimi Hendrix, Ray Charles, and David Bowie. Jim Rakete doesn't know how many people he's photographed over his career, but he's been doing it for 40 years, handling up to 3 shoots a day. He's not interested in prizes or trophies, though. What's important is artistic control, deciding for himself who will be his subjects. As in his current project, Rock Poets. Some of the faces in the black and white portraits are well known. Others are of members of little-known bands that rehearse in Berlin's cellars. Jim Rakete wants to see the person behind the musician, so before each shoot he asks them about their dreams and their careers.
We shot from the hip. I wanted photos that would be like an encounter of sorts. I wanted them to come in, show me their face and fill out a questionnaire, and that's what happened.
The result is a series of portraits that depict the vibrant contemporary music scene in Berlin. For the newcomers that Jim Rakete has captured in the limelight, the show may be the first step to new fame and fortune.
Next Next, we head for Moscow to catch up with the Russian version of Banksy, known as Pavel. Pavel discovered his love of street art at the age of 11 when he started writing poems on walls around the city. Ever since he was 14, he's used his artistic talent as a form of communication to anonymously connect with the public.
This former railway depot on the outskirts of Moscow is a meeting point for Russian graffiti artists. It's also Pavel's favourite hangout. He's a street artist who goes by the name P183. In front of the camera, he always wears a balaclava. He wants his work to be famous, but not his face. Some of his older works are fading, but they're still visible. One is the Alyonka girl, the face on the famous Russian chocolate. For Pavel, Alyonka represents the child in us all, but she's the child who has learned to sell herself to achieve success. P183, though, is resolutely non-commercial in his approach.
When I was training as a graphic artist, I noticed it wasn't really a creative field, at least not in the way I understand creativity. To be a creative artist, you have to work on your own things.
Pavel's best-known work is the bridge burner, a masked figure who is taking a flaming torch to a bridge. To make sure the flame looked authentic, Pavel hurled a Molotov cocktail onto the concrete. It's a work dedicated to bridge burners everywhere, and to innovators who abandon the familiar in favour of the new. For P183, street art is, above all, a form of expression.
I'm a very reserved person. This is how I communicate. Street art is a way of expressing myself.
P183 prepares for his graffiti projects in his small apartment, which is also his studio. He leads a simple life, he says. He turns down assignments where he won't have creative control. He doesn't want anyone to tell him what he's allowed to work on or what opinions he's allowed to hold.
I wouldn't call myself a political artist or one who gets involved in social causes, even though both of those things are important to me. I create what I see. I need to have an idea, an image in my mind, a topic that unsettles me. Then I create something with it.
Pavel films his projects and uploads them to the internet. Last summer, he pasted images of police officers on the glass doors of a metro station. To enter the station, people had to push them aside. Pavel also captured the responses of passers-by with his camera. Along with the police cleaning staff are the other great enemies of his work. But Moscow has plenty of urban canvases to go round, Pavel says. Even so, it's rare that he can work during the day undisturbed. In the center of Moscow, it's nearly impossible. Many Russians still scorn street art and see it as little more than vandalism.
Sometimes I have to pay a fine. Sometimes there's even a scuffle. I've been beaten up, shouted at, removed from the premises. I've been called names.
P183 wants his work to grab attention, to make his viewers laugh or think. These portraits of famous artists bear the inscription, "I beg for bread." An homage to the struggle of artists everywhere. Perhaps one day, Moscow will look more favorably on street art. But until then, P183 will continue his mission to challenge and provoke.
and we continue to look at the work of artists in our next report, though this style is aimed at quite a different audience. Axel Scheffler is the illustrator behind the internationally famous children's book called The Gruffalo. There is currently an exhibition of his illustrations here in Germany, but we went to meet him in Britain, where he now lives, to see him at work.
Axel Scheffler lives with his family in a picturesque London suburb near the River Thames. He grew up in Hamburg, but came to England to study and stayed. He has lived in Britain for 3 decades now. Axel Scheffler is a German illustrator of English children's books, which are ideal goodnight stories.
Ich kriege den Text ohne Bilder.
The texts come without pictures, of course. Then I get to work. When I'm doing book illustrations, I usually do little sketches in pencil or with a felt tip. I put them on my light table and trace them in pencil onto watercolor paper. Then I draw outlines in black ink.
Axel Scheffler's style is relaxed and simple, using ink, colored pencils and watercolors. While his drawings may seem cute at first, a closer look reveals their intellectual sharpness.
Things just come to me. I don't know how. It always goes quickly. I read the text and the images just come to me. I discovered these watercolors even before I went to art school and got in the habit of using this technique. It's not something anyone taught me. It's a technique I taught myself.
As a young illustrator, Scheffler was inspired by great artists like Jean-Jacques Sompé and Tommy Ungerer. Now it's the stories by British children's writer Julia Donaldson that provide the inspiration for his drawings.
The first picture book I ever did was called Daily Bee. It's the story of a rabbit with an identity crisis. Back then I didn't spend quite as much time on the details, so it's all somewhat flatter.
Flacher.
My first book with Julia Donaldson was A Squash and a Squeeze. There's a nice co-edition story about it. In the book, a goat is sitting on the bed. The Americans wanted to buy the book, but took offense at the partially visible udder, which they thought looked obscene. So for the American market, I had to get rid of it.
But the book that turned Axel Scheffler into a star was about a mouse who uses a clever trick to scare off his enemies.
The
Gruffalo came along years later and is still our most successful book.
Und ist ja bisher immer noch unser erfolgreichstes Buch.
My original Gruffalo was even scarier. Here he's crawling on all fours.
The clever mouse invents a fictitious friend, a horrible monster, to frighten off creatures who want to eat him.
And naturally, the climax of the book is when the mouse meets the Gruffalo.
There really is a Gruffalo, and his eyes are orange, his tongue is black.
It's very gratifying to see what Julia Donaldson and I have given people with our books, which bring together children and adults. They're fun, yet they also send a very subtle message. Julia doesn't hit you over the head with a hammer. Her texts are quite subtle.
The children's stories have been translated into 26 languages and given joy to millions. Still, Scheffler's quite a serious kind of person.
I'm probably more the melancholy type, like so many other people who make people smile. That's the cliché, the sad clown, isn't it? I tend to be one of the people who aren't so positive, optimistic, or full of joie de vivre.
Axel Scheffler's illustrations are hugely successful in spite of, or perhaps because of that.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Euromaxx Highlights, coming to you from the German capital. Until we meet again, from myself and the entire team here in Berlin, thanks for watching and see you again soon. Take care and bye-bye for now.